Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, the coronavirus infection rate continues to drop in Israel. Students begin to slowly trickle back into class, and with the virus seemingly coming under control, Israel gets ready to reopen its borders to visitors from select other nations. We open with some great news. The coronavirus infection rate is continuing to drop here in Israel. In the last 24 hours alone, Israel only saw a rise in 23 new cases. That's the lowest daily rise in the last 6 weeks. And it means that Israel is continuing to see a downwards trend in the COVID-19 infection rate. As we speak, over 16,200 people and counting have been diagnosed with the virus in Israel. 94 are in serious condition, with only 76 now on ventilators, and 69 are moderately ill, and almost 10,000 have now recovered. The death toll has risen to 232 people, but good news is that the Israeli Health Ministry says that there has been a fall in the percentage of tests for the virus that are coming back positive. In the past 24 hours, over 5,800 COVID-19 tests were carried out in Israel, and just 0.5% were positive. So where is Israel still seeing the highest rate of infections? Well, right now, Jerusalem is still the most infected city with over 3,500 patients, followed by the predominantly ultra-Orthodox city of Bnei Brak, and then finally Tel Aviv. So regulations are already being rolled back given the lowering infection rate. But this coming week is going to be crucial for the Israeli government in determining when and how to fully reopen the economy. That said, the government ministers expected to meet today to approve the reopening of malls, gyms, and open-air marketplaces as soon as this Friday. Now, Israel's High Court of Justice is now entering its second day of live hearings to discuss the legality of the pending unity government between the Likud and the blue and white parties. Today, the expanded panel of 11 justices will be focusing on the rotational agreement between Prime Minister Netanyahu and Knesset Speaker Benny Gantz. Such a rotation would require major changes to Israel's makeshift constitution or the list of so-called basic laws. But so far, it looks like the court is leaning in favor of the new unity government, following the first day of arguments focused on whether or not Netanyahu can form and lead a government while under indictment. In fact, of the 8 petitions raised in the court against this unity, 5 are pertaining to this issue. Again, though, with no basis in legal precedent to support the petitioners, it looks more and more like there will be nothing barring Prime Minister Netanyahu from continuing in his post. At one point Sunday, Chief Justice Esther Hayut was even pushing back hard against the petitioners, saying, "Show us something, a law, a verdict from the country's history, from somewhere else in the world, something. After all, you're asking us to set a global precedent. Do you want us to rule without a basis simply according to your personal opinion?" At any rate, the court deliberations continue today, ahead of the deadline to form a coalition on Thursday. And if a government is not approved of by then, it's back to fourth elections. So the High Court of Justice is reconvening now to discuss the various petitions against the tentative unity government. And joining us to discuss the political and constitutional implications of these meetings is founder and president of the Jerusalem Washington Center, Gideon Israel. Thank you for joining us. Now, right now, the hearings are talking about the 3-year coalition deal signed by the blue and white and the Likud parties. But Chief Justice Esther Hayut has raised some serious concerns, particularly because of the deal requires changes to several basic laws. Can you discuss these concerns?
Sure. There's the basic law of the Knesset that explains how the Knesset works, the structure of the Knesset, and so forth. So a few problems are the fact that you have, instead of one prime minister, you're going to have 2 prime ministers simultaneously, meaning that once Netanyahu resigns, or once he stops being prime minister, Benny Gantz automatically becomes prime minister, as opposed to in the past when you had rotation agreements, you had one of the candidates finish being prime minister, and then the second one was voted in by the Knesset. Here, that automatically happens, which is a change to the Knesset law. Also, instead of a 4-year government, it's going to be a 3-year government. So that's another change.
All right. Well, now the judges have criticized the way in which the coronavirus crisis actually has been exploited, so to speak, to change the system of government in Israel and to appoint officials as well. So what roles are yet to be filled and require immediate appointment?
Well, some of them are the person who's going to be the head of the police force, the mafkal of the chief of police. Another one is who's going to be the head attorney for the state of Israel. And in both of those cases, the idea was that the idea is who's gonna pick. Is it gonna be Gantz's person or is it gonna be Netanyahu's person? So they said, all right, let's have a government for 6 months, and then we'll discuss this after 6 months, after the corona crisis is over. So that was the idea. Instead of arguing now who's going to decide and who's going to have veto power, they said let's just push it off for another 6 months.
I see. So does that mean that we're just not going to have those positions filled?
Very, very, very possibly. I think we've already been going on. We've at least been maybe a half a year, if not more, without a chief of police. In terms of the state attorney, that there is someone who's fulfilling that role, Dan Eldad. He's been fulfilling that role for 3 months, and the question is whether his tenure will be renewed again. That's right now. There's a dispute right now between the justice minister and between the legal advisor to the prime minister. I think another thing about the corona crisis was that no law would be discussed in the Knesset except having to do with corona. And the judges said, well, what do you mean? That's the job of the Knesset to discuss laws. Why is it that nothing can be done? Nothing, even small things, can be done until the corona crisis is over. And for that, the attorneys for the prime minister for the coalition said, what we mean is that things that have to do with corona will take precedence over other things, but it doesn't mean that no law can be passed until the corona is over.
All right. Well, speaking of the hearings and kind of the power of the courts, really quick, right now after the hearing so far, the right has been criticizing the courts for getting too involved in political issues. What do you think on that?
Well, the right has been criticizing the High Court for many years for involving themselves on so many issues where the Knesset has passed laws, specifically so many laws on immigration, where the court has canceled those laws. I think Justice Antonin Scalia once said that he reads court decisions of the Israeli High Court just so he can feel that America hasn't gone crazy in its judicial activism. So the right feels that there's been so much judicial activism for years, and the activism is always on the side of the left wing. So, and therefore, in this case, where the law says that a prime minister, until his trial is over and until his verdict is final, he can be prime minister. So there's no room to even judge on whether he can.
So it looks like we may have a government then. It sounds like they're going to be siding with the right and against these petitions, but we'll have more on that soon. Gideon, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, a dangerous new trend has been growing across the world amidst ongoing lockdowns at home. Incidents of domestic violence have been spiking, and in Israel, the deadly spike is as high as 20%, according to the Knesset Special Committee for Welfare and Labor. In fact, at least 4 women have now been murdered by domestic violence in Israel since the beginning of coronavirus lockdowns in March. And 2 of these murders have been perpetuated in just the last week. Then in just the past 12 days, at least 400 complaints, or at least 33 per day, have been filed with the National Domestic Violence Helpline. So in response, the Welfare Ministry is opening a new method to contact the helpline via text. And that's not all. The head of the Na'amat women's organization, Hagit Per, is calling on the government to immediately fund its $71 million project to combat domestic violence, a project which has been frozen for nearly 3 years. Also, the Welfare Ministry's committee is relaunching its campaign to rehabilitate women who escape domestic violence, with plans to make it available in Arabic and Amharic in the coming days. But perhaps most important is the message from the Special Committee's chairperson, MK Aida Thomas Sliman of the Joint List Party. She says that women in danger of domestic violence have been forced into a trap with these coronavirus lockdowns, and she's urging all women who may be in danger to break the rules and leave home immediately when at risk. In other news, the coronavirus may have frozen most life in the Middle East, but what about international threats against Israel? Well, here with us now for a security breakdown is Middle East expert and chairman of the Professors for a Strong Israel, Dr. Mordechai Kedar. Thank you so much for being with us. Now, who are the key players in the Middle East who are most affected by the coronavirus?
Well, the key player now is the coronavirus itself. All the others are pushed to the margin and are trying to survive, both economically and politically and on every other aspect. Israel is not the problem now. Today they are fighting an enemy which nobody can see, nobody can hear, but everybody feels, because it has very, very heavy ramifications on their economy, life, of course, and the future is very, very opaque in many of the Arab countries as it is now.
So will the harsh situation in some of these Arab countries like Turkey, like Iran, will that cause them maybe to lash out at Israel, though? Because we've seen a lot of cases where they're blaming Israel or the Jews for the coronavirus, really.
This is in the margin, especially within the Palestinians. They are trying to spread the idea that Israel is in charge or is responsible for the whole coronavirus in the world, but very, very small number of Arabs buy this nonsense. They know exactly who is the problem. China, and in the Middle East, it's Iran, which brought it from China and spread it in the Gulf. And nobody really in the official echelons blames Israel for this. On the contrary, now many in the Arab world understand that Israel is not the problem. Israel might be even the solution, while the problems are totally different. And as a result, today you can see a very, very high tide of anti-Palestinian sentiments in the Arab world, especially in Saudi Arabia, in the Emirates. And you can see it in the social media, you can see it in Facebook, you can see it in many cases, how Saudis are speaking clearly, openly, with their faces open, against the Palestinians. First of all, they claim that the Palestinians actually blackmailed the Arab world, their money and their emotions for 72 years instead of sitting with the Israelis and solve the problems. And people blame them that they don't even want to solve the problem because they want more and more money forever. I mean, they blame the Palestinians for becoming addicted to the gifts which they got for free from Saudi Arabia, from the Emirates, from Qatar, from others. And now when the needs are so high because of the economy, which is deteriorating in many Arab countries, people started to understand that they gave too much money to the Palestinians in vain, because nothing was solved through the years. Now, the problem here in the Arab world actually are two problems. One is the prices of oil, which are sinking because of the flood in the market. You know, Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, Russia as well, are competing with each other, and they actually are selling now oil for prices which do not cover their expenses, means below the zero from their point of view. Why? Because they have to continue producing oil. So this is one thing, and they don't have money because they need, Saudi Arabia, in order to have an even budget, they need a price for barrel like $75.
All right, well, it's going to be very interesting to see how all of that plays out, especially as the coronavirus doesn't seem to be letting up in some of these areas. Dr. Kedar, thank you so much for being with us.
Pleasure.
Meanwhile, it's back to school for Israeli children following weeks of shutdowns and remote learning initiatives.
אנחנו מאוד מתרגשים. מבחינתנו זה כמו 1 בספטמבר. כולנו הגענו חגיגיים, חולצות לבנות, אמורים לקבל 256 ילדים, עד כה נכנסו 230 ילדים. אני מניחה שיש הורים שעוד חוששים וייכנסו גם מחר.
דיברנו על שטיפת ידיים, על שמירת מרחק, הבאנו אלכוג'ל, מסכה, מגבונים, דואגים לשמור על מרחק. ומקווים לטוב.
Sunday has become the new first day of school for millions of students in Israel, as elementary classrooms up to 3rd grade have been allowed to reopen. And in line with health ministry guidelines, classroom sizes have been limited to 15 students, each sitting 2 meters apart and donning masks and gloves. Meanwhile, alcohol gel, sprays, wipes, and other cleaning supplies are available at nearly every turn. And if all goes well, more grades will gradually transition back to the normal daily routine, with all grades slated to return by the 1st of June.
מתרגשים וחוששים ביחד, אבל צריך לעשות את הצעד הראשון. אם כולנו נחשוש לא נחזור לשגרה. אני בעצמי מורה, ואני חוזרת עוד יומיים לתיכון פה ללמד.
But not everyone is as excited about the return. Some 35 cities and local municipalities are continuing to stay home, at least for now, including the cities of Tel Aviv, Ashkelon, Rosh Ha'ain, Haifa, Ramat Gan, Be'er Sheva, and Tzfat. These cities will reportedly begin opening schools by no later than next week. And as for individual parents, hundreds of thousands of families are refusing to release their children back to class, arguing that they refuse to see their kids become guinea pigs of the health and education ministries. Now, schools may be opening back up for students up to the 3rd grade, but not everybody feels that it's the right move. In fact, there are many children and parents alike voicing their fears that opening schools too soon could spark a resurgence of the coronavirus. Well, joining us now with more is Israeli psychologist Dr. Camila Folkash-Lavan. Thank you so much for being with us. Now, how do you make your kids feel calm about going back to school after they've seen the effects of the virus?
So it's very, very, very important to know that how you feel will affect your children as well. So think about it from their perspective. They were waiting for so long to go, to play, to do all the things that they wanted to do, except now that they go, they will end up in school, and what they see is masks. Yes, and half of the facial expressions are gone, and there are gloves, and you have to clean yourself, and all of these things. So it's very important to understand that this may affect them also for the future in terms of anxiety and hypochondria. So it's very important that you are also calm as a parent. Like, if you decided for yourself as a parent that you are comfortable with it, they'll be more comfortable as well. If you decided as a parent that, okay, I'm not comfortable yet to send the child, or I'm not sure, and it makes sense also because, even if you're cooped up at home, if you're going to send them out, you don't know what they're going to bring. So different people express different concerns, and I've heard quite a few of them, and it makes sense, yes? So whatever it is, which side you're on, and if you're not sure, do those discussions with yourself or with others, not in front of the child, because it will only make them more stressed. Come to them already with the decision that you made.
What about teachers? Are they properly prepared, do you think, to deal with the anxieties of these students?
I think that for like how you say, in general, probably not, but I'm hoping that schools will take that into consideration, and school psychologists as well, and have meetings to discuss this, because it would be very important that you as a teacher, of course, are also a person, and you have your own doubts and on certain things and whatever is going on. But it's very important for that half an hour, 40 minutes, to be there for the children and be extra happy and extra excited and extra welcoming, because again, half of your face for the most part is closed, so all they have is the
It's all up here then. It's all in the eyes, I see. You got to convey it with the smile marks. Camila, thank you so much for being with us again today.
Thank you so much. Stay safe.
Bye. Moving on, wearing a face mask in public has become more than just a law. It's necessary that as many people as possible cover up in order to slow the spread of the coronavirus. But between poor manufacturing and/or improper use, there's still a big gap in our defenses. Well, Israeli teams are working to address this now, and ILTV's Nittany Manson reports with the details.
Readily available personal protective equipment, or PPE, has become a necessity in the fight against coronavirus. But what happens when your face mask, the most basic PPE needed, isn't up to snuff? Well, researchers at Ben-Gurion University in the Negev are now working on a self-sterilizing filter that can be applied to public transportation, personal vehicles, heating, ventilation, and AC systems, and of course, face masks too. The technology is based on existing water filter innovations, and it basically consists of an LIG, or laser-induced graphene filter, which is resistant to bacteria and kills microbes and viruses when under a low-level electrical current. But in the meantime, until that's ready, there's another option already piloting in Israeli hospitals: an antiviral sticker that can be attached to basic face masks to provide better protection against COVID-19. The sticker, called Maya, is 3D printed with nanotechnology, and it's been developed by Professor Eyal Zussman and his team at the Israeli Technion Institute of Technology, along with the National Emergency Team within the Defense Ministry and the Galilee Medical Center in Nahariya. Speaking with No Camels, though, Professor Zussman explains that the pilot for using these stickers is already underway in hospitals and medical centers across the country, and it's comprised of an absorbent nanofiber network coated in disinfectants to effectively neutralize viruses on contact.
It looks like Israelis might be closer to be going on vacation than they might think. The Israeli government is reportedly in talks with 7 other nations that have also made progress in fighting off COVID-19 to permit travel between them. ILTV's Natasha Kirchuk reports.
Where would you want to go on vacation after all the coronavirus restrictions are lifted? Well, locals from Australia, New Zealand, Denmark, Greece, the Czech Republic, Israel, and Austria may soon be able to visit each other. That's because each of these nations has made significant progress in combating the coronavirus, and their infection rates are dropping. So now Austrian Chancellor Sebastian Kurz is proposing a new initiative to promote tourism and trade between them. Leaders from all 7 countries have just taken part in a video conference on April 24th, all to discuss how they can reopen their economies and tourism sectors in the most strategic way possible. Their borders could be opening within the next few weeks, according to a report by the Wall Street Journal. But before doing so, each nation would need to establish a set of common protocols to ensure safety. That would likely include masks, testing, and social distancing.
Most Israelis are drafted into the army when they turn 18 for at least 2 to 3 years. But joining the army doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be out on the front lines of the battlefield. The IDF has its own band, radio program, and it even drafts soldiers to perform as professional dancers. Or at least they did until now. ILTV's Nittany Manson has the story.
If you're obligated to join the IDF, it doesn't matter how famous you are. And earlier this year, 2 major Israeli pop stars were drafted into the Israel Defense Forces, Noah Kiril and Yonatan Mergi.
So how you think you're free, but you're at my crib? And how you're giving up when you're going in? You say you gotta live, but you know that
Both singers are a pretty big deal here in Israel, so when they were enlisted for the army band, the military decided to expand their troop to include backup dancers. That's right, professionally dancing IDF soldiers. But it turns out the army didn't really understand what they were getting themselves into. After a video of a performance of Noah Kiril on an army base surfaced with 2 soldiers bopping behind her in full uniform, senior officials were not impressed. According to the Army radio, the IDF's top brass doesn't like the sight of the IDF soldiers dancing like that in full military fatigues. To them, it disgraces the military. Well, as a result of the complaints, it looks like there will no longer be any more Israelis being drafted as dancers. Those already conscripted will be reassigned to roles that allow them enough free time to dance in civilian settings. But no worries, Kiril and Mergi will continue singing on stage, just without any backup.
All right, they're big and they're back. The world's largest fish spotted off the coast of Eilat on Israel's south coast today, a year after the rare whale shark was spotted in the area. Inspectors from the Eilat Maritime Unit filming the beast, which can reach 15 meters or 50 feet in length. That's bigger than a school bus. And an event like this is extremely rare because these ocean giants are endangered. Although last summer, 4 were seen in 6 weeks. Despite weighing a whopping 34 tons, that's 68,000 pounds, they're not dangerous to humans. So these divers could have a whale of a time swimming with these majestic creatures. Now let's take a look at the weather forecast. We're looking at partly cloudy skies today in Tel Aviv with a warm high of 24 degrees Celsius or 75 degrees Fahrenheit. And then tomorrow you can expect lots of rain with heavy thunderstorms developing in the afternoon and a cooler high of 22 degrees Celsius or 71 Fahrenheit. So make sure you don't forget your umbrella. And now before we go, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel. Preparing for vacations early, I guess. The best way to travel from lockdown. I love the creativity. Oh, God. Wow. If you have to travel from home, I guess that's a good way. And that is it for today's news. Exchange rate today is 3.53 shekels to the American dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube and Roku TV pages. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you so much for watching.